Hi, I'm Josh Cadillac, and welcome to my podcast, Know Your Shit. I've been blessed to see great success, as well as seeing the bottom up close and personal in 2008. And if there's one lesson I've learned, is that if you want to have success and differentiate yourself from everyone else out there, you need to know your shit. As a successful real estate and crypto investor and an educator, it drives me insane that people do not immerse themselves in their craft. Everyone is so busy advertising and testing new sales techniques, they forget the most important thing, the product. Here I want to talk to the folks that got this right, the most successful people in the world in every industry. Bring them to you and find out what they learned in their business that made it great. When you listen to my podcast, you will know for sure that the topics and experts we have on have one thing in common. They know their shit. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Know Your Shit podcast, where our knowledge and pride in what we do drives us to be excellent. My name is Josh Cadillac, and I'll be the driver's seat for today's show. We have a great show for you, and that's because we have an amazing guest. Cynthia Barnes has joined us. Cynthia, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Josh.
Cynthia, maybe the easiest place to start would be to ask you, what is it that you do?
I am a keynote speaker. That is what I do. I help decision makers.
Make decisions.
Make decisions, exactly. I influence decision makers to say yes.
That is a good stuff. It's always good when decision makers are making decisions. It seems like it's right in line with what they should be doing in the first place.
Right.
So let me ask you, what got you started doing that, Cynthia?
Back in the day, way back in the day, I founded the National Association of Women Sales Professionals, and we were laser focused on helping women in sales reach the top 1%. We provided them with training and development created by women in sales for women in sales. And slowly but surely, companies started approaching me saying, hey, you know what? We know that you can elevate women in sales, but could you teach our leaders two things? Number one, how to coach women in sales effectively, helping them overcome the unique challenges they face while amplifying their innate strengths. And could you help our talent acquisition team attract, develop, and so that we can retain them? So that's how I got into keynote speaking.
Make them good, and then how do we keep them once we do make them?
Right.
I'm in real estate, and that retention of people once you've trained them is such a huge issue in that industry, in our industry.
Yes.
I know that's a message that definitely resonates in a lot of fields. You invest so much in your human resources, your people, and then those people then jump ship for 50 cents more someplace else.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very demoralizing, especially when you're well-intentioned and trying to do it the right way.
Absolutely.
And I love the idea that you're not approaching this as a cookie cutter thing. There's a difference between what the ladies need and what the men need to be good at work, right? Because we have different strengths and weaknesses, and it's learning how to take and get the best out of everybody that works for you, right? How to do it well. So I love that as well. It's one of my favorite topics to read and talk about is like in education, the difference between what women need to succeed and what men need to succeed, or boys need to succeed. A lot of really interesting stuff on that we've talked about in the show quite a bit. Where do you think, though, Cynthia, all of your success came from?
It would have to be from the expectations my parents put on me when I was a kid and the reality check that they never let me forget. So my father grew up in the South, Jim Crow era. So if you can imagine a Black man living in a predominantly white area and being limited on what he could do, say, and be based upon this color of his skin. So here he is, and we moved to a sundown town in Indiana. He sits me down one day and he says, I've got some news for you. And I'm playing with my Barbies, and I say, okay, whatever, Daddy. He says, you have two strikes against you. You are a Black girl. Now, keep in mind, this is the lens through which he's looking. He's trying to set me up for success by helping me realize that I've got to work hard to achieve the same success that my peers want to achieve. It's not right. It's not fair. Essentially, he's telling me there are going to be people who judge you based upon your gender and based upon your race. It's not right, but be prepared. And then he says, while I'm at it, There are three types of people in the world: those who make things happen, those who wait for things to happen, and those who wonder what the hell happened. He said, if you're going to be successful, and keep in mind, I'm 6 years old, I'm trying to play with my Barbies, but this is what he instilled in me when I was younger. He is a trailblazer, and he was one of the first African Americans to be in the air refueling unit in the Air Force in Vietnam. My mother was a supervisor at Chrysler, and she defied all types of odds. So I grew up knowing that anything was possible if you were willing to work hard and sacrifice. So that's how I operate.
You know what? I love it, and I do because my father, my parents, 100% are at the core of what made me what I am, and the idea of hard work. And my father wanted to make sure I wasn't even 13 before I had my first set of calluses I earned on my hands.
Yeah.
Right? I dug ditches. I did the hard work. He wanted me to understand that there was honor in all work that needs to be done, and that all deserve to be done well. And
Yes.
and I can see, as even I'm saying it, I can see that there's this shared thing, because my father also was a pioneer, and there's kind of this respect they all have for how much work goes into pursuing greatness, pursuing what the maximum that you can get out of yourself really
Yeah.
is. And it's it's sad, and I love what you're doing, because you're not making excuses.
No.
And there was no excuse making in what he said. He said, "Hey, look, this is the reality of what it is. This is what you got to work with." And then there's always that CEO question: what the hell are you going to do with it?
Right.
This is the opportunity. What are you going to do with it? It's sitting there. It's in your hand. How are you going to make the most out of it?
Yeah.
And so, man, that is just, love that stuff. Great stuff, Cynthia.
And for people like you and me who had parents who instilled the work ethic and the pride that comes with doing a job well done, the pride that comes from always striving to be one step above excellent, we know that it's our duty to succeed because of the sacrifices from those before us. So there is no quit. There is no excuse. There is no, well, I'm tired. We do it because number one, we know legacy is important. And number two, too many people have sacrificed to get for us to get where we are. How dare we not be the best we can be?
Cynthia, with a keynote that I do, I teach a lot of classes, but I have a keynote that I wrote, and it's literally exactly about what you said. The idea of this legacy. I hearken back to Paul talking about the crowd of witnesses watching us finish our race. And I'm like, who are those people? Those are the folks that came alongside me as I was running my race, and they helped me. They showed me. They didn't have to, but they did. They came alongside and they helped me run my race, and now their race is done.
Yes.
And they're just in the crowd watching. And whether or not they have something to cheer about, or they experience the feeling of your favorite player striking out in the ninth inning as the tying run on base, is based upon the choices that I make. I could give them something to cheer about, or I could make them feel that sense of loss. The decision is in my hands. And to me, I mean, this is so good, because I've always believed, kind of, and especially when it comes to issues like gender and race where there's discrimination, I've always believed that the best way to do. My father was Italian, grew up with a lot of problems. My grandfather, especially in New York, whatever. Don't want to go there, but the best way to punish somebody that chooses to behave that way is to make them economically pay for the choice to pass you over. In other words, if you're great at what you do and they choose not to hire you because of how you look or how you are, you reward the person that does hire you by
Yes.
being better than what they could. They're going to experience that loss, because they're going to have the inferior group of people they're working with, because they didn't go for the best.
Right.
The idea of meritocracy is such a beautiful thing. People rising based upon what they choose to do and bring to the table.
Yes.
So, man, you are in my wheelhouse. I'm loving this. So, what do you like best about what you do, Cynthia?
Oh, changing the way people think, making them pause and say, what if? What if we were to implement this? What if I were to take a look at my own biases? What if I asked myself if the women on my team would thrive?
Yeah. What would that look like?
What would that look like?
Good stuff.
Yeah.
What do you think makes you good at it though?
Passion. Passion and my why. People talk a lot about you've got to find your why. You've got to find that reason that gets you up in the morning and says I get to do this rather than I have to do this. That fire in the belly that differentiates those that are interested and committed. You know, if you're interested in running a marathon when the sun is shining and it's 72 degrees and everything is great, you're going to go practice and you're going to go run. It's when the snow is flying and there's hail and you have the sniffles, that's committed. If you don't have something that causes you to jump over the fence from interested to committed, you will fail every day and twice on Sunday.
Absolutely. What are you going to do when it starts to suck?
Exactly.
Who are you going to be? I've got every reason in the world. The one I love to use as an example of that, I've got every reason in the world not to go to the gym today.
Yeah.
But if I go to the gym on a day like today, when I have every reason not to, I define myself as the kind of person that shows up even when it's hard.
Yes.
And then when it's hard next time, but it's not quite as hard, I'm like, well, wait a second. I did it when it was way harder than this. I can do this.
I can do hard things.
I can do hard things. It's
Yes.
such a, and I want to actually almost jump back to something we talked about a minute ago because I think it's such my brother's a philosophy professor, right? And so we talk a lot about, the big ideas behind things and culture, like taking a look at culture and taking a step back. And there's this beautiful piece about what you talked about how you feel that you're this representation of the people that came before you. And this is an idea that's dying in our culture rapidly. People are more and more selfish. And it's really that selfishness that says, well, if I want to do this, I can do whatever I want. There's no thought to, like it used to be, like, oh, gee, you don't get pregnant. Oh, my God, you'd kill your parents would die. I mean, what would they, what, because you realize that their reputation is like, you represent that.
Yes.
Like, they poured into you. And that idea is like dying. And like, it can be carried to an extreme. Like, you look at like the Far East cultures where like, you dishonor the family, well, just go ahead and kill yourself. Well, I mean, that's too far, right? But I mean, the idea that like, I need to behave better than I would for myself because it's not just about me.
Right.
There's all this huge group of people that are responsible for the progress that I've made and that I'm now responsible as a torchbearer to carry their legacy forward because I represent not my legacy. I also represent their legacy as well.
Yes.
I'm what's left.
Absolutely. And people are watching. There's nothing that sparks joy in my heart like when my 11-year-old niece says to someone who says you can't do this, she immediately claps back and says, well, why not? My auntie does. My auntie says that I can be anyone or anything that I want to be as long as I'm willing to work hard and make sacrifices. That right there shows me that what I do, what I say, who I am matter.
Absolutely.
Representation matters.
Absolutely. There's the particular keynote that I'm talking about. There's a section where I talk about this representational legacy, right? But there's a story that I tell about my mom. My parents adopted uh, an older sister. They didn't think they could have children before I came along, and so they adopted an older sister for me. And she got married, had 3 kids. Everything was fine. Well, the first 2 kids, everything was fine. The third kid wound up with Down syndrome, a feeding tube in her side, all kinds of medical issues, all the way up until she's like in her 20s. They told her she was never going to be able to hold a job. She was, never going to be more than like 4 foot tall. I mean, like all kinds of problems, right? So fast forward, of the 3 kids, she winds up growing up to be the most successful of the 3.
Really?
Winds up with not only working like a little restaurant, she winds up becoming the manager, winds up being moved up to corporate, successful family, all sorts of things. They asked her, and nobody, I mean, it was just amazing that she did so much, right? Learning disabilities, the whole gamut. They asked her one day, how did you get so far? How did you defy the odds and everything like that? She said, Nana Joey, my mother, one time was talking to my sister and said to her, you can do anything you put your mind to. And she said, I knew, and this is as a little girl, she says, I knew as a little girl, if Nana Joey said it, It had to be true. And it changed the course of her life.
That is the best story. That is the best story.
It is the best reason I can give you for why I do what I do, because if I
Yeah.
can make one kind of a little difference, that say that right thing at that right time that somebody needs to hear,
Yes.
man, their existence could be a little better off. It could be a game changer.
It changes the trajectory of so many things, not only her life, but those who are watching her.
Absolutely. Love it. So let me ask you this. This is kind of an off-topic thing, but I like to always put it out there and interpret this any way you want to. What do you see as the opportunity in the market today?
I think it's wide open. I am a firm believer that there are two schools of thought. I grew up in a culture, a working environment, in the automotive industry. That's where I kind of cut my teeth. The big three have this mindset of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The studies that I did early on talked about the Japanese auto manufacturer, and they said if it's not perfect, keep working.
Yep, keep it getting better.
I think that there are so many who subscribe to the latter that think if it's not perfect, we're going to keep working. So when people say, what's the future? I'm counting on, and those who are listening, I want you to think about what if you had unlimited resources? What if you could surround yourself with the people you need to make whatever it is that you want to happen? I believe those people are the future, and I believe that those change makers are just waiting for someone like us to say, come on, let's go. It's okay to be the best, to be a game changer, to be a trailblazer. Here's your permission slip.
To pursue excellence
Yes.
unabashedly. Yeah,
Yes.
no, I agree. I'm a big fan of figuring out. I feel like, and you tell me if this jives for you. I feel like we've been given what we've been given, whatever that is,
Hmm.
and we're going to have to be called at some point, whether to ourselves or to a higher power, to give account for what we did with what we've been given.
Yes.
This is what you had. What did you do with it? There's a book, you've probably read it, called Can't Hurt Me, David Goggins.
Yes.
And my favorite part of that book is at the very end of the interview when he's talking about sitting before God and God pulling out the chart. He said, like, I know it doesn't work like this, but like I kind of like to think that it does. God pulls out the chart and says, all right, so this is what you could have done, and this is what you did. He said, my goal for my life is for God to pull my chart out and go, oh, wow. I said, that's such a simple statement, but like, oh, wow, right?
Yeah.
To take a sit there and say, you really kind of gave that best return on investment for
Exactly.
what you have. So, yeah.
I think about those end days, and I think about that getting to the final spot. And I think about something similar. The St. Peter looking and saying, you've done well with what you had. The parable of the talents. You used what we gave you to change the world, and you trusted and you acted. And then he says, "But would you like to see what the heavens had planned for you?" And he pulls back this curtain, and you see all the things that you were too scared, too timid, too insecure to try or to say yes to. I want to leave it all out on the field. I want there to be nothing that I didn't say, heck yeah, let's try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But what if it did work?
Cynthia, that is one of the most common themes in this podcast that I've had. We are interviewing successful people, is this willingness to try.
Hmm.
This willing, actually, the one gentleman said it better than anybody I ever heard. I try to figure out ways to say yes to things.
Yes.
In other words, the opportunity comes in and rather, well, no, we can't do it. Obviously, the schedule and, well, wait a second. Could we move something? Could we take and figure, could we clone ourselves? I don't know. You're looking for the way to make it so it's a, yeah, well, wait a second. I have a lunch break. I could get on a Zoom with you and I could give you the interview. And then, I mean, I have 3 minutes left to eat, but I've eaten in less time. And like, how do we make it work?
Right.
And there's just kind of, for most people that don't get there, they're trying to figure out how they can let themselves off the hook and not feel guilty
Yes.
passing on the opportunity. Like, do I have a good enough excuse is the question they ask, rather than, can I figure out how to make this happen?
Yeah.
And that to me is it's their loss,
It
because then
is.
they have to look back.
And the world's lost.
And everybody else's loss. Like, it's when I drive down the street and I see young guys sitting there on the stoop in the middle of a work day, doing whatever, smoking whatever, doing whatever, just goofing off. And I'm thinking, how much has the world been deprived of?
Yeah.
Because these guys aren't out there trying to figure out how to get their maximum capability out of themselves and make this world a better place. Because everybody loses in that situation.
Yes.
And so that, to me, it's always a tragedy. It's a small tragedy to some extent, but it's actually a massive one when you really think about it.
Yes.
Because these are lives that haven't gotten to where they could be.
Right. And that is a huge tragedy. And it's also a reminder to us that maybe they just needed someone to believe in them until they believed in themselves.
That's kind of actually where I go with it almost. Like, what's the lie they bought into
Right.
that someone told them that's got them thinking this is the best they can do?
Yes. Our words have power.
They do. They do. And it's, sadly, and I mean, I've done a lot of volunteering at schools where I'll teach, messages on investing and how to use money well and all this kind of stuff. And you see the people that actively go out of their way to try to ignore what you're saying, because if they were to show interest, it would immediately brand them somehow as less cool.
Yeah.
And that's, once again, one of those ideas that you buy into that now has these lingering consequences. I'm sitting there trying to give somebody the keys to the kingdom and saying, hey, look, here's my pain and suffering on display for you. Here's everything I learned the hard way. Please, please don't learn it the hard way. Learn it the easy way. Here's the keys. Go. And I'm a bit too busy. Let me turn up the iPod. Let me turn up the headphones so I don't have to listen to this. And you always have the people that do. But the ones I'm always shooting for are the ones that maybe if I could just take and get them to listen for 2 seconds, maybe we could swing it. Maybe we could flip the switch and maybe come at this thing from a little bit different way again.
Yep. How
Nana Joe said, how do you get them? How do you get them past the garbage that they believe to get to the good stuff? Because they kind of come at life. A lot of young people do this from this idea that, like, life is out to get them.
Yes.
They're already, I mean, kind of like what your dad said, you're 2 strikes behind, but he gets you the next piece, which is you're 2 strikes behind. So what are you going to do with the 1 strike you got?
Exactly.
Right? As opposed to they just get told kind of, and I mean, this is not even a race or a gender thing. This is everybody. There's this everywhere.
Yes.
Right? Everybody has the group that buys into, like, they're not going to get ahead. They're not smart enough. Somehow the world's out to get them. How do we get them to figure out what's actually in the tank?
Exactly. Because we all have what my father calls those 2 strikes against me. What are you going to do with it? You can turn it. And I chose to turn adversity into bounce back ability. I chose because of my parents believed in me without a shadow of a doubt.
It's a beautiful gift.
Yes, it is. Not everyone has that gift. So how do you change the paradigm of someone who doesn't have anyone pouring into them to get them to even think, dream, imagine a life other than what they have? That's a real hard one because everything around them says, I am destined to be only as good as my surroundings. I see things on TV, I see things on YouTube, TikTok, but my reality, my surroundings are destitute. How do we change that? How do we get them to think there's more to this than what you see?
Well, I mean, I think that I don't want to use the word victimhood, because I see this with all people. I mean, I teach real estate agents. There is such a culture of excuse making that exists.
Oh,
Like,
yes.
you don't have to feel bad about where you are because you dot dot dot, because your parents got divorced, because you were born on a Tuesday, you weren't tall, whatever. I mean, I'm 5'8" and I try to play football in Florida. All right, I wasn't tall, I wasn't all this. I still wound up setting records at a school, right? Because I just worked harder than everybody else. I could do it a little bit, and I did what I had to do. But not everybody can do that, right? But it's a matter of, I think it's two things. One, eliminating the excuses, and two, eliminating the Disney Channel approach to life, which is whatever your dreams are, just follow your dreams. No, figure out what you're here to do. Figure out what you're good at, what you can do that gives you joy and what makes you great, makes you enjoy this thing.
Yes.
And do the hell out of that.
Yes.
Right? That's what's going to make the world a better place. And it's going to make you feel better about the life that you've lived.
Absolutely.
But there's not really that bigger picture approach. Like, for me, it's always, what's the end supposed to look like? What do I do today to get to the ending that I want? What do I want the end of my life to look like? Who's this guy got to be today to be that guy at the end?
Yes.
And so it's not a commonly talked about thing. We talk about, what do you feel like in the moment? It's all this perpetuation of selfishness.
And take feelings out of it. Feelings have nothing to do with it. If you rely on feelings and motivation, you will never accomplish anything.
I totally agree. How I feel is just a speed bump in the way of me getting to where I need to go. Oh, you don't feel like it? Well, I guess it's going to suck for you at the gym today, Josh. This is the conversation I have with myself. Like, it's not even a question. I guess it's just going to be, you're going to be miserable while you're there, but you're going.
Right.
It's going to happen. It's got to get done. And so I think it's part of it also is moving from the category of the things that are optional to do to the category of things these are mandatory to do, whether I feel like it or not. This has to get done.
Exactly.
So how are we going to get it done? And that's when that beautiful creativity of the human spirit comes out, because now it's hard and it's got to get done. How do we get it done?
And that's one of the most important questions we can ask ourselves is, how can I ... Your mind starts to go into solution mode of, okay, maybe I lay out my clothes the morning before. Maybe I put workout in my calendar to make it non-negotiable. Maybe I do this. But if you take and put how can I at the top of the page and list 25 things that you can do, surely you can come up with a system that leads to success. Not feelings, not motivation, not anything other than decisions. I decide to do this because I want the results.
Totally agree. Like, the idea of systems, I'm such a fan. The systems I use to manipulate this guy, to get out of this guy, what I need this guy to do, you would not. Like, I come home and I know I'm supposed to go to the gym. I keep using the gym as an example because it's one of those things, especially when you work at the end of the day, it's hard to do, right? What's the scam? What's the scam I pull on me? I found there's a much greater likelihood of me going to the gym if I immediately put my gym clothes on and put my shoes on.
Yes.
If I lace up my shoes and everything, well, now I don't really want to get in my bed because I got my shoes on. So, like, I'm not going to, right? So now I'm sitting on the couch. I'm like, well, you should really go, and I'm much more likely to get this guy to do what he's supposed to do. And these are the scams I run on myself all the time to put me in a position that I'm most likely to succeed, because there's this version of me that wants me to be the best. I call it the CEO, the person running the company that wants to take and have my company be a great company. And then there's the employee who's figuring out how we can work 38 hours and get paid for 40, right? And I got to take a deal with these two warring places in my mind. Well, as you start to take and perpetuate this, that CEO starts to win more of these negotiations. And you start to become less like that lazy, lesser version of yourself, and more like that version of yourself that you always hope that maybe one day you could be.
Yes.
And that's what this battle is about, is getting to be less like the lesser version and more like, well, the best that you could possibly be. Because, and I've said it on here many, many times, everybody runs the risk of dying with their best work still inside of them.
Such a shame.
And there's really no bigger individual and global tragedy than that, because the biggest loser is you. You never get to see what you could have done. And then everybody else that you care about is the next sphere that gets hurt most. and then the rest of the world that ripples out to them as
Mhm.
well, because they're deprived of what your best could have looked like.
Yes.
Nobody ever gets to know how season 10 would have ended, right? It's it's tragedy at its best. But we go off on tangents. It's a thing.
We do. We're rabbit trails.
And there we go. The rabbits are running, and we're running right with them. What do you think, Cynthia, is the most important thing you've learned in the process of doing what you do?
Success is not created in a vacuum. When I started my company, the association, I thought I had to do it all myself. I wore a different hat based upon the hour: accountant, social media manager, bookkeeper, toy, chief toilet paper replacer. I was doing it all. When I sat down and looked at all the things I was doing, I realized that I was doing them all half-assed. Because not well, because I couldn't. There's no way that I could be an expert accountant because I was too busy doing marketing, social media, all of this. So, McDonald's has a philosophy, what they call refer to as aces in their places. And it's based upon the philosophy that during the lunch rush, when it's the busiest, you've got lines wrapped around the building. You don't put your manager on the French fry station. He or she may be really great at French fries, but if the person in the back, in the cashier, needs quarters, the manager has to stop doing what they're doing, French fries, go and get quarters and give them to the drive-through cash person. Every order, almost every order, 90% of orders at McDonald's get French fries. So that creates a bottleneck because now your French fry person is gone. So aces in their places mean that people should do what they do best and everybody else fall in line. I am not an accountant. I am not a bookkeeper. I'm a CEO. I'm a keynote speaker. That's what I do. I choose to work on my business rather than in my business. And that made a huge difference, the biggest difference.
When you just take and focus on tuning that thing up and letting it run at maximum capacity, doing that thing that you're best at, as
Mhm.
opposed to bogging it down with all the other noise. I totally agree. I totally agree. So, what do you think makes you passionate about what you do? You said passion before. What do you think? What do you think it comes from?
I'm good at it. I'm impactful. And I believe that it's divinely inspired.
Love that. Love that. No, no. If you got a job to do and you were put here to do the job, you best find a good way to do that job.
Yes.
I totally love that.
And trust that if God comes and taps you on the shoulder and says, I want this, he whispers in your ear and says, I want this done. You have to trust that he will provide the resources, open the doors, and touch the hearts of the people you need to get it done.
Absolutely.
Too often we say, that's a great idea, but who am I to do that?
Mm-hmm. No, I think that the way that I like to describe it, because it's an idea, the one you're talking about is one that I've been really, the last couple of years, I've really wrestled around with it, is the idea that I get in trouble when I start thinking my rank is higher than it should be. All right. So, like when I think I'm a general on the field, that's when I get in trouble. I am a foot soldier waiting for orders.
Yes.
My job is to have my boots laced, my rifle ready, and if I get told go right, I go start going right, and then ask, just how far right do you need me to go? Like I just follow the orders,
Hmm.
and so that listening for what I'm supposed to be doing, that idea of you know that there's something bigger that's getting done, and I'm a small piece of this war that's being waged, which means sometimes this soldier needs to be on that hill and I have no idea why the hell I'm on that hill, but that's my hill, and nobody's taking it on my watch because
Right.
that's my hill. And so making peace with that, and honestly, the beauty of that is all the blessings that truly come out of it. Some of the best stuff in my life has occurred when I stopped trying to take and make command level decisions and just started going where it seemed like I was being led to go.
That is really humbling. And For type A people, very, very challenging. Very, very challenging.
It's challenging is probably the best word that describes being a business owner,
Yes.
being in charge. There are challenges aplenty, and it's our ability to figure out how to adapt to those and be humble enough to learn that humility, especially when you've been very successful and you see most everybody else doesn't quite hit the level that you do. Like in my business, nobody really works harder than I do. So now who are you going to get advice from? And do you respect the person enough to take the advice? That humility to sit there and say, hey, look, just because I'm good at this thing, maybe they're way better at the other thing that I don't know about. Like it's staying in that place, and it's managing yourself. I have a friend. He's an actor on Broadway, and he's been nominated for 3 Tony Awards. So like when I say he's an actor on Broadway, he's like really good at what he does, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's still one of the nicest, most approachable people you will ever meet. And the reason why is he actively practices humility. Like he goes out of his way to remind himself who he is and that he's not anything more special than the guy on the street.
Right.
And it's especially considering what you do and what I do. You get up in front of people, you get all kinds of applause and stuff like that. You got to kind of always remember, hey, look, I'm working hard, whatever, but this is by the grace of God and all the things that came behind me. And yes, I've chosen to take the harder course, but I'm a byproduct of all that. So I really don't have anything to brag about that much. Like cool your jets just a little there, brother. It's a thing.
It is.
So a perfect segue to the next thing. I just talked about cooling your jets and not getting too prideful. I want to ask you this question. It's actually a 2-parter.
Okay.
What are you most proud of in business that you've done?
I was the first Black keynote speaker at a national sales conference.
Awesome. What are you most proud of in life that you've done? Bigger question.
I am proud of the fact that with all the challenges and the sacrifices that my parents made, that they're proud of me.
Nothing more important than that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, my father didn't live long enough to see me get where I got to. And the idea of thinking that maybe he's up there saying, that's my boy. Yeah, that'll bring me to my knees every time.
Yes.
Every time.
Yeah, every time. Yes.
Because I know that's the mantle I carry, right?
Right.
All right. What one piece of advice would you give our listeners?
Take whatever dream you have and multiply it until it gives you goosebumps. Until you say, there's no possible way I could achieve that.
Couldn't do it. Yeah.
Write it down and then ask yourself, what if? What if it was possible? We don't dream big enough. We think we compare ourselves to the people in our Instagram feed, on LinkedIn, and we say, well, that person has 1 million followers. I want 1,000,001. Why do we compare ourselves to that instead of saying, I want 25 million followers and then go after that dream? Why say, if you're on the leaderboard, well, the top person in my office makes $2 million in commission and I want 2.5? When you compare yourself to others, you only do as well as they've done. I need people to start dreaming bigger. They print new money every day.
They do.
They do.
And a lot of it.
And a lot of it. They probably destroy more money than we'll ever see in our lifetimes. Just dream bigger. Bigger, bigger, bigger.
Love that. All right. Completely change of pace question here.
Yes.
What one book or movie would you recommend to the folks watching? And people are going to be totally judging you based upon this. So pick something really goofy. I'm kidding.
If I had a movie that I would recommend, probably Home Alone.
Make you laugh on the inside and the outside.
Yeah.
I never saw my father laugh harder than watching that movie. It's one of my favorite memories. Going to see Home Alone 2 in the movie theater and him laughing so hard that I thought he was going to have a heart attack. It was hilarious. Watching my father laugh was one of the funniest things in the world. He had one of those great laughs. So it's a great movie. All right. I know you're a person. Obviously, you and I are both the same mindset of putting that pressure on yourself to keep that ball moving, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which means there's almost always something next on the horizon for you. So what's next for you, Cynthia?
A TED Talk.
Okay. No hesitation there. You know where you're going. I love it.
Yes.
Now, I suppose the other end of the spectrum is in line. And you've almost survived the gauntlet, by the way. Almost done. Okay. What do you do to unwind?
I play with my fur babies.
Okay.
And
What kind of fur babies?
I have a pit lab mix named Sheba
Okay.
and a 1-year-old Roddy named Kobe.
Beautiful. I have a 3-year-old English bulldog named Chubasaur.
Ooh.
And he is my joy. I love that little fat ball of fluff. He's great. All right. Last question. Probably the easiest of the entire bunch.
Okay.
People want to know more about Cynthia. Where can people find you?
LinkedIn.
All right. And under Cynthia Barnes?
Yes.
All right. Well, Cynthia, you survived the gauntlet. Thank you so much for coming on and spending time with us and sharing your wisdom with all of our listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. You are so energetic, and I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for having me.
As did I. It was truly my pleasure. So thank you again. And everybody, I want to thank you for listening to Know Your Shit podcast. I'm reminding you, go out there, always know what you're talking about, work hard, put the work in. You'll be surprised what happens if you just do the work.